world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne. Hey everyone, it's your host Kate Byrne. Welcome to Women Advancing. So I know we all talk about how, oh my God, we're living in times of cray-cray. And with that cray-cray comes a lot of chaos. I'm sure many generations ahead of us said the same thing, but I think we've taken it to a whole new quantum level. So what do you do when your company actually faces a crisis? And that means, even in today's news, something that is seemingly outside your realm, because of the deep politicization that's taking place, it's become your issue. Well, for most leaders, the instinct is to move really quickly, fast, plug the holes, and hope nobody notices. But not so easy in today's world, because information moves at such a quick speed and trust can be lost like that. That approach, it just doesn't cut it. Well, thankfully, our guest today, Selena Strandberg, who's the founder and CEO of The Know, is going to help us with all of that and has been very successfully helping a number of leaders across a number of different sectors fix just this. Selena's using AI not as a buzzword, but as a lifeline. And she's busy helping companies anticipate crisis, manage them in real time, which do we respond to, which do we not, and then protect the integrity of the information flowing from both internal stakeholders, right? So your work, your culture, your in-place work culture, as well as external, your customers. In our conversation, and I loved it, by the way, we really take a look at the intersection of crisis management and AI, how it can be helpful and a friend, as long as you keep one hand and the right hand on the wheel. What it means to build a company with integrity at its core, really living with values. And I'm hopeful, and I do believe that the Know as a tool is helping, not to be harsh, but to help companies really hold their feet to the fire so they can be values-based, which is something really important to this multi-generational workforce that we're living with now. We take a look at also how founder and VC networks can really help you getting funding moving forward. And we talk about the importance of using a growth mindset, which really is required to turn those moments into opportunities for stronger leadership, but also overall smarter systems and, greater innovations, right? This conversation, anyone who wants to lead with resilience, clarity, and heck yeah, a whole lot of courage, because in the end, it's not about avoiding the crisis. It's about knowing how to show up when they hit. Let me know what you think, and be sure to stay to the end. We got a few KB takeaways for you. Oh my gosh, Women Advancing listeners, we're in for a treat today. I am so excited to introduce Selena Strandberg, who's the founder and CEO of The Know. Selena, welcome.
Hi, Kate. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Selena's been working on something. I met Selena in a previous life, earlier life, where she was working on some amazing projects there to try and really kind of get the younger generation more informed about politics, which thank you for all that previous work. And now it's really exciting to hear what she's putting her talents towards. But before we go there, I like to take us back to the beginning. How did you get here? As David Byrne said in his song.
I went to school at GW in Washington, D.C. And I went to school there very much with a lot of passion around democracy, around politics, around international affairs, and really the civic process. So I studied political science there. I studied international relations there, and I very much intended to work for the government right after college. Quickly, I worked at the State Department my senior year of college and really, really enjoyed the experience, but saw a lot of need for government efficiency improvements, process improvements, cutting waste, all of that sort of stuff. So I took my first
Not
job at Deloitte.
protein.
There's plenty of room to make improvement in the government. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So I went to Deloitte Consulting actually as my first kind of career out of college. And I worked in their federal practice, which was really focused on working with federal clients to do that sort of thing. I was there for a few years and in the process really got bitten by the startup bug. I started sketching out a few ideas of my own, working with friends, kind of thinking through and tinkering with different ideas. And it led me to moving out to Silicon Valley and becoming part of the tech ecosystem. So I spent 5 or 6 years out in San Francisco on the go to market side of the house of a couple early stage, high growth venture backed startups. Most of my time there was spent at a company called Hired, which was a job recruiting marketplace. I launched and oversaw their expansion into new categories and new product lines. On my way back to DC, somewhere along the way in 2018, we had a big midterm election cycle. And I had a lot of friends who were planning to not vote in the election because the California ballot is very long, a lot of referendum items, and it took too much time to fill out the ballot, which I thought was a pretty sad excuse and a concerning one for people kind of living in the tech ecosystem where tech was trying to solve all of these big problems. And it seemed like it was creating a lot more in the civic engagement, information integrity space than it was solving them. So by the time I moved back to DC just before the pandemic, I had launched something called Know Your Vote, which is what you and I met during, which was a nonpartisan voting platform meant to bring a high integrity primary source data to the average voter to plug into the political process. So on every candidate, kind of up and down the ballot, we assembled on every issue their voting record from Congress, their public statements, pulled in all sorts of both government and social media, political website handles, all of that sort of stuff to show accurately what candidates themselves had said or done, as opposed to kind of providing secondary reporting or journalism over top of it, given that media has become so distrusted. So
Yeah.
I'll pause there. That's how I got to Know Your Vote. That's where you came into the story, Kate, and then I can move on to where we went from there.
Yeah. So do because I'm going to circle back to Deloitte in a little minute. Okay. So now enter the no. Tell us a
Yes.
little bit
So
about that and how you knew. Well, tell us about the no first. And then I want to know how you knew it was like legit. It was like, wait, this is actually a company. It's not just sort of a passing fancy or a spark.
yes, there was a lot of hard work that went into that. So the no evolved in a very circuitous path from Know Your Vote, which was that along the way, as we were building Know Your Vote and we were creating nonpartisan media that was reaching, predominantly we were reaching younger women. In the process, we had a couple clues into corporate America being engaged in civics, being engaged in social issues. And it led me down a path ultimately of conducting a lot of deep stakeholder research interviews with CEOs, chief communications officers, risk officers, CHROs, and ultimately came to understand that there was a massive problem with managing and making decisions inside of a large enterprise when major news stories break.
Ah,
So there were kind of countless examples in the 2020 to 2023 time period, which was when we were initially iterating on this and then doing really deep R&D. So everything from the pandemic to Hamas invading Israel on October 7th, and then the resulting conflict from there became these big flashpoints for corporate America. And it became very clear that it was a huge pain point for executives that wasted a lot of time and ultimately took them away from their day jobs, but they didn't know how to act. They were constantly making decisions like, yes, we'll say something on this crisis, or no, we won't. And they were getting blowback and not having any real way to act with confidence. So a lot of it was kind of like finger in the air, making a gut decision, and it wasn't landing.
And the thing about that, I would imagine, is twofold. One, yeah, you've got your external stakeholders, but then you're also the impact that makes internally.
Yeah,
All of your employees just
totally.
would wreak havoc. So meanwhile, you're trying to run the company outside and inside, but nobody's getting anything done.
Yes, that was really the genesis of where we started with the software. We now cover all sorts of stakeholder groups. So companies can use the Know to understand how employees, customers, policymakers, you name it, different stakeholder groups are feeling or engaging on a topic. But our genesis was employees specifically. And what we continued to find was that it was really, really difficult, especially in companies that have geographically dispersed,
Mhm.
generationally diverse workforces. They have a lot of different opinions, a lot of different backgrounds inside the company, and a lot of demands on the company to either be engaged or not engaged. And it was very, very difficult to separate signal from noise on what was actually something that was potentially going to risk the employer brand, cause revolt, bleed employees, or really ultimately just cause the ones who stayed to check out
Yeah.
versus what were maybe some of the things that were just a few of the loudest voices kind of rising to the top when the rest of the workforce was actually, not expecting or wanting any involvement from the company.
I mean, literally, it is so hard now leading anything because you have to be all things to all people.
Yes. Yeah,
I mean, you just do. And it sounds to me like the no is something that, and it's the tech behind it, is it helps someone actually, it helps the leader best figure out, okay, if nothing else, okay, here's one that's worth it. They're all worth it, but which ones really, if I had to triage, which ones are
yeah,
going to the biggest impact and really are most relevant for me?
totally.
Those that I'm not going to say anything about, at least I'll be able to have some background and understanding of a quick little statement about like why I'm not.
Exactly. I think so. A couple things I would add there. So the No at this point is really an AI decision engine that helps cross-functional executive teams make the tough calls on complex issues. This has now expanded beyond just news issues. And so we have now seen kind of, especially this year, use cases with any major policy change a company has to think through. Return to office, how they're communicating about AI in the workforce and its impact on labor and headcount and all of those sorts of things. So it's really kind of any sensitive issue. But what we found across the board was for so many of the issues that are more maybe geopolitical or socially charged, not every company should be involved in every issue, but where there are major problems is when a company does or does not do something that conflicts with its brand values or that conflicts with the precedent they've set previously. So part of the calculus that the No ultimately spits out is looking at what have you said and done before? What are your values? There's a whole kind of complex set of considerations the software goes through in terms of where are their employees, where is your customer base, a number of different factors. But
Right.
those two around precedent and values are where we've seen the most companies really stumble, unfortunately.
Yeah, I bet. And I think, I mean, the thing that I love about it is it does help sort of blind spots, obviously. But that piece about values, I know that so many, especially younger generations, right? We all
Yeah.
we want to go to a place that's purpose driven and lives by its values. But this is a way to literally hold companies' feet to the fire, as it were, in a way to really walk their talk at long last.
It really depends on the brand and what the company wants to do. I think a lot of the companies we've worked with this year have really struggled with the DEI rollbacks.
Mhm.
And so, we entered this era where DEI is frowned upon and companies had to really quickly consider if they were going to change policies, if so, what to. And a lot of them did, at least visually, pull back from DEI. But what we've seen really consistently is a lot of those same companies are still doing what was essentially DEI related work or holding on to and acting on the value itself while maybe calling it something different.
Yeah.
Not making a judgment one way or the other, but the values piece is really important. And I think that a core takeaway for a lot of customers is thinking through kind of the values piece and where their actions do or don't align with it.
So what kind of industries do you find you're working most with?
So it's pretty just it's pretty diverse now. So we work with large technology companies, e-commerce companies, large consulting firms, retail, uh, finance. So we're kind of across the board now. I think the biggest thing that we've found is really that like the spread of where people are located, the breadth of the company, the size of their footprint. Generally, like rule of thumb, the larger the company, probably the bigger these problems are. And I will say one interesting thing is some of the use cases that the software has expanded into in this new kind of new administration that took place in January has really surprised even us. Basically, the levels of complexity that comms, corporate affairs, risk orgs are thinking through right now is substantial. And so they're kind of wargaming and planning out all sorts of different options should policy land in one direction or another. And it's really pretty big whiplash from where they were a year or two ago. And they're not sure kind of where it will go in the following years. So there's this constant kind of whiplash that makes it very difficult to think through complex issues.
Which is why everyone feels a little seasick.
Yeah.
I right, I would imagine. And, it literally is almost like a 3D game of chess.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad way of putting it.
Right. Yeah, it sure seems that way. So in listening to your story, the thing that I love, because I always talk about, the Steve Jobs 2005 speech that he did at the Stanford commencement, where he talked about everyone has their significant dots. And that eventually something that seems sort of unique, at some point you're going to stop it and you'll look back and go, wow, this all connects. This
Yeah.
informed this informed this informed this. So obviously the hired bit is the whole company culture thing. And now,
Yeah.
right? And so I love that. And it's going to be so important, especially now that we're working with let's call it some human coworkers, some not. And
Yeah.
the bot. And now now you have this, would you call yourself, you're not really a startup because you're pretty settled.
Oh no, we're definitely a startup.
Okay.
We're definitely a startup. That's
Okay.
really generous.
But so now I'm just thinking, okay, so was there anything from, sort of like Deloitte, right? Structured, highly analytical. How did that impact, or has it, or have you seen it? Has it shaped your leadership style as you're beginning to sort of build this? Because it can go off the wheels. We know that, off the rails.
Yeah.
When you're doing a startup, especially with some of this information being so quick and the technology evolving so
Totally.
quickly, right?
Yeah. I love that you pulled the thread of how everything kind of connects because I often find when I tell people how I got here, it's like I have to go all the way back for you to be able to see that there is actually a through line, but it's exactly what you say. Looking back at it, it makes actually a
Perfect
lot of
sense.
sense.
No,
Yeah.
it's so well informed and I love it. It's a beautiful example of it, really.
Yeah, thank you. The leadership piece and kind of time at Deloitte is interesting. I think the time at Deloitte was formative in a couple ways. One, in the way that I understood that I was not fit for that culture in a just kind of day-to-day sense. Like I realized pretty early on that I was pretty entrepreneurial and that I just did better in a really scrappy environment. But the flip of that is that the process learned at Deloitte and the structure is so valuable, or it was really valuable to me. I think especially because by nature I am, scrappier, entrepreneurial, and left to my own devices, I wouldn't put the process in place. But I had that from Deloitte, and then I actually got to take a lot of that and put it into practice at Hired as we were building out kind of different functions, building out the sales outbound organization, things like that. And I think that really, really helped. And that's always I think that will always be an area for me to continue to get better at. So I'm glad that I at least had that background from Deloitte to start.
Exactly. Is a key differentiator, I think. I've done things and I just have done it the way I've done it. And somebody asked me, so what's your process? And I'll never forget sitting
There is none.
I'm like, what process? What do you think? How do you do it?
It's just the Kate Byrne process, whatever that is. Whatever
it
it is on that day, in that moment.
But it is terrific.
I know.
Right? And it gives you a bit of rigor. And it kind
Definitely.
of helps save yourself from yourself sometimes. At least my experience. Redirecting, going, I'd be tempted to, oh, wait. And, going back to that through line, like, what's the back? Like, where's the end we're trying to get to? Let me go rework it, re-engineer it backwards engineer it so I make sure I'm kind of going the way that I want to do.
Yeah, startups are so chaotic. There's always a balance between just executing and getting something done and moving and testing and just flying forward and putting process in place. And I think probably every founder is constantly feeling that tension of, wait, do we go back and put process in place? Do we just keep moving forward? And it's a tightrope that's very difficult to walk. And so I think since I naturally lean more towards the like fly forward direction, I'm glad that the process piece of me has been at least taught in a good, like, kind of finishing school.
Right, you've got the good foundations. Exactly.
Yeah.
You have good bones, good foundational bones.
Otherwise, I'd be running the Kate Byrne process all day too.
So, okay, funding. Everyone's favorite. It's no surprise, right? Funding is tricky. And we know we've read all the stories. Oh, there's a funding gap, blah, blah. How do you work with that? How do you get around that? How have you contended with that? Have you seen any shifts in that?
Oh man. Yeah, fundraising is not easy. There's no way around that. I would say I think standard entrepreneurial advice, and it's correct advice, is going through other founders who have worked with other investors to get your introductions to them. So I worked the founder network very, very hard. I will say I received a lot of introductions and support from both male and female founders. I will say that commiserating is probably the right word with female founders was the most mentally supportive part of it, because it is a different process, and the volume of conversations that you take, the volume of no's and kind of unclear reasons why, they're just by the numbers higher. And it's a hard process for everyone. There's no way around that. But getting support from female founders was absolutely imperative. And now that we have investors, we have great investors. And now the game's changed a little because they can help make introductions for more funding. So I don't actually know. I don't have a good perspective on how much that has or hasn't changed because I haven't really gone out and done a proper fundraise recently. I don't have a perspective on that, but it is a little different having already kind of made it to the starting line.
Well, the way you just post it is really an interesting way of thinking of it. First, you think of your own peers, right? You work with your own founder network peers. Then once you get those VCs, they're the ones who start doing the peer networking and the peer fundraising, which is terrific. You got your foot in the door and then they boot it wide open.
Yeah. I mean, I think where the big gap is, and this is well documented too, but it's if in order to play the game, you have to have the right network. It's not hard to understand who in the room has the ability to access a network and who does not. And that's super difficult. I want to say the only way to get in front of investors is through warm introductions. That's not 100% true. And I do know some firms have made an effort to take cold inbound to try to kind of combat this just only network effect. But the reality is that by and large, deals get done through networks, and that's it.
That's what it would seem. That's what it seems like to me. Where you certainly stand a better chance of getting to a yes with one of
no doubt. No doubt.
Besides you just heard for the first point. Okay, so one of the key things I know, obviously, that all entrepreneurs contend with are the lovely pivot, the art of the pivot. And change and running into a brick wall, or there comes a time when you realize, I can't fall in love with my idea. I really want to, but the feedback is clear. So, what's been one of your most courageous leadership decisions so far?
Oh, you teed me up for that so well. Pivoting away from nonpartisan political media into the no as an enterprise software operation was huge. It was very emotional. It was really hard to let go of, and ultimately was the right decision. And the reality is that we knew it was the right decision pretty fast. Like, it still took a ton of work. It still took more time than we expected, as truly every step of the startup process has. But we had big customers paying us fast. And there's no surer sign of at least starting to get to product market fit than getting paid long enterprise deals. We knew that we were on to the right thing by that point, but that was a tough leadership decision to make that required that, people who worked with me bought into one mission, either stuck around for a totally new product, a totally new offering, or they left. And it was challenging for me personally. And then it was challenging to have those conversations and know that what we did changed, the impact that it had on people who worked with us and now no longer do.
Right. Well, and I was going to say also, when you do something like that, it would be hard not to take it somewhat personally, too. I mean, it is sort of an expression of, loyalty to the leader, right?
Yeah,
And realize
totally.
I can't take it personally. If this is not their jam, then that's okay. They're not saying I wasn't a good leader. It's just they can't get on board for this part of the ride because it's just either too much or they don't care. It's not their passion.
It goes both ways. Like, I was aware that people who worked for us, in large part worked for me and believed in what I had portrayed to them. And in changing that, like, you're breaking some level of trust and it doesn't feel good. We made the right decision for the business, no question. I have no regrets. I never have. But it's hard. It wasn't enjoyable.
Oh yeah. Well, what you are now building and what you have built is so incredibly important. Oh,
Thanks.
for this incredible phase, really, of what the world's.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind,
Yes.
aside from being, fabulously.
So there are, kind of two phases of this, or I guess two pieces, I guess, that come to mind. The first is the kind of clear tactical, making it easier for companies to know how to show up when is kind of the driving North Star of what we are doing. And it's really, really fun to do that because it's a big problem that has so many thorny layers to it that we constantly get to unravel and figure out new ways the offering should address a problem or new offerings that should exist on top of it and kind of maybe overlap or play together. The other piece is ultimately for me around information integrity. I have been obsessed with the problem of information integrity for years now, since probably kind of that 2018 midterm cycle when I really started to get deeply concerned with some of the problems the tech industry had made. And part of our offering ensures that the people leading the largest companies in the world have accurate information, both from an understanding of what's happening in the world, as well as what's happening with their stakeholders, both internal and external, and are working from a set of facts.
Yeah.
And so that information integrity piece is really important to me and something that I really, really value. And I would love for that to be a lasting legacy of the company.
So, I love that. So, Selena, with that in mind, what would be like a question that someone just average should ask
Mm.
themselves when they're looking at that? Is there something kind of just basic, like, to
You mean when they're looking at like the software?
when they're looking at information that where they
Oh,
can
oh,
sort of poke and figure out, real or Memorex? Real or AI, I guess, is more likely.
I mean, the first question is, where did it come from? And unfortunately, that's going to get much harder to determine. And I'll save my thoughts on AI advancements and kind of what's coming down the line, I guess, for another conversation. But at least for right now, where we're at, if you get hit with a piece of information online, for the most part, you can go find where it came from. And if you can't, maybe that's a check in and of itself.
That gives you right, exactly. That's what I was gonna say, kinda gives you a little bit of a hint right there, probably.
Totally.
Well, we're definitely gonna have that second conversation about AI, not now, but, like, in 6 months. I think would be fast. I'd love to get your take because I know things are we think it's been
Yeah.
fast. We're about ready to go on part 2 of the rocket ship
I
run.
know. I was going to say from now to 6 months, it's almost hard to envision exactly where we'll be, but the growth will be outrageous in
Mm,
both good and bad ways. And I think, the problems that we're going to have to tackle are going to be much larger and more complex.
yep. And I think in an interesting way, I've always thought that I get it, and I think in a weird way, it may actually bring our humanity back to us to a degree.
Oh, same. Tell me more.
Right. Well, so to me, everyone talks about, oh my gosh, AI, blah, 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 blah. One, they're the people behind the AI, right? But I also think to me, it requires nuance to harness it and to guide it. At the end of the day, you were the
Correct.
guider. So
Yeah.
everyone always feels hands off the, reins. Uh-uh. No, you really got to double down and you really have to, I mean, it is clay, you mold it.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
what prompts are in my mind. But I
Yeah.
also think there's just there's certain things that it will never be able to do. It get a pretty doggone close, perhaps,
Yep.
even in its wooing answers that "You're so great, you're so smart, fabulous answer, blah, blah, blah." I think it's going to make us, the human aspect of ourselves, come out more, and that nuance, that human nuance, be it empathy,
Yep.
compassion,
I totally agree with that.
all that soft stuff that everyone takes for granted, I
Yep.
think it's kinda like bamboo. That's what's gonna be the powerful thing in the end.
I completely agree with that, and I think something that's really been top of mind for me, and I'm not sure, like, how much this conflicts with general sentiment in the Valley and amongst the VC community, but the relationship component is just going to be bigger. There is, I think, a lot of guidance in VC land to, make everything fast, make your deal cycle faster, which is, of course, always the goal, but at least I've seen so far, and I expect to continue to see the relationships really coming into play and how um, companies or individuals choose products to use or choose services to get. I think that will be invaluable. I think the softer things, to your point, that we have, or maybe the VC community has kind of poo-pooed to this point around relationship development, things that are don't scale, around brand, which is often kind of looked down on. I think they're going to be differentiators because, to your point, that is kind of where we will see the humanity piece that people really want.
Exactly, because that, to your point, is gonna be the brand. That's gonna be that special
Right.
little spark, and you can't quite put your finger on it, but that's the whole uniqueness of all of us. I think it's just gonna bring that to light, knock on wood, and I think things are gonna be a little bit more. They're gonna be fast, but they're gonna be slow a little bit down. And that's what I mean is having that kind of a human exchange.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
There'll
Yeah.
be sort of an unspoken it'll feel like pause, or it'll feel like a little, um,
Yeah.
between time. It'll just like, "Okay, da, da." So, alright.
Right.
Well, I won't okay. So, we'll save the rest of that for another
Well,
conversation.
hey, in 6 months, we'll come back and find out if we were totally wrong.
Absolutely. So everyone come on back with us. But last thing for you, knowing what you know now, my friend, what advice would you give your younger self?
My younger self, I would tell to take more risks. I think I've really like come around on and gotten pretty deep into understanding of growth mindset. And I
Mhm.
don't think that there are that many things that if I or some other person wanted to do, we could not. A lot of it is repetition, it's training, it's wanting to do something and letting yourself fail and taking your next at bat. And you see that consistently with like, I'm the last person that should use a sports metaphor, but that is how plenty of major world renowned athletes become them. They fail, they miss so many shots, they keep going. And I think that there's, especially for women and especially for students coming out of like a certain ecosystem, playing it safe and taking the path that's been prescribed or expected feels like what you're supposed to be doing. But the reality is, especially when you're young, like I look back on my 20s, you just have a lot less to lose. You can take a lot of risk. And, if it doesn't work out from the startup perspective and from the kind of pivoting perspective that you raised earlier, the beauty of it is like you never really fail. You're learning from something and you're adjusting and you're taking that learning and building something new with it. So I think taking more risks is something that I would tell my younger self.
Yeah, I agree. I was fortunate enough mid-career to work. I was the oldest person in the company, worked with a startup, and that founder, I was mortified. I had done something. I was like, oh, I made a mistake. He's like, there are no mistakes. Everything is a learning. So what was our learning? And that
Yeah,
literally I've taken.
it's very hard to wrap your head around. If you're not from that kind of framework growing up, that's a mindset shift.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we're learning to sail, God help me, which is not only physically learning how to sail, but it's whole freaking language. So
Right.
that growth mindset, in fact, when you said it, just made me think about that. It totally comes into play there. But the thing that came to me too is this notion, it comes full circle to what we were just discussing about with the AI pieces. All of those things go back to values.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right? And so that's why I can't wait to see what, God, 6 months, we're gonna be in the know about the know. Just saying, everybody. Yeah. I know, like I know. Well, Selena, thank you so, so much for your time.
Thank you, Kate. I was so excited when you reached out. Thank you for having me.
No, it's my pleasure, and thank you for everything that you're building. Um,
Absolutely.
we're gonna put it to the test. If ever we
Yeah.
need it, now is the time.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time. Wow, wasn't that a great conversation? I know I say that after almost every conversation I have with people, but you got to admit, so many extraordinary and also seemingly ordinary people doing some pretty amazing things out there in the world. And I'm glad you joined me to hear about it. So here's my takeaway from Selena, my conversation with Selena. One, we hear a lot about you know, about working your network. But that should also make sure that your VC network does the same. So that to me reflects a certain generosity of spirit. Your founder network, they can share and give you other sources of where you can get investors, but make sure the VCs do the same thing. That last one's trickier because they kind of like to keep the good ones to themselves. So keep an eye on that. Second, I love, and now more than ever, this product, the Know, is so important for helping companies and their leaders know how to show up and when to show up. And there are going to be times when you will not have a formal statement, nor should you. The point about that is simply share that with your team because they're all going to be up in arms. Sometimes you don't need to contribute to the noise. And that's really what always having that's a reaction versus a response in my mind. Third, growth mindset, really, if you can make that mental shift and recognize that everything that doesn't turn out the way you thought it was going to, rather than looking and viewing at it from being a mistake, it is, reveals that there was information you didn't know. And really, in the end, it's all about the learning. And as long as you do that, great. Okay, you learn. You're also less apt to repeat the same learning moment. And lastly, information integrity. This to me is key. One key, very first thing you should look at is where's the source? What is the source? Where's the information coming from? And then you take it from there. The end of the day, especially with everything, AI getting more and more involved in our eyes, always have to keep one hand on the wheel, right? And you have to make sure it's the right hand. No pressure. All right. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to the next conversation on Women Advancing.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.